Good evening, everyone. Today's my talk is on Goddess Chandika, a Vedantic perspective. A very difficult topic because mother is someone who cannot be captured in words. She is someone who cannot be captured either by poetry or theory or any way, and that to speak about her from a Vedantic perspective is even more difficult challenge because there are hundreds of perspectives possible to understand her. There could be a Shakta perspective, which could be very different from Vedantic perspective, and there's a perspective of a Bhakta, which could be different from both Vedantic as well as a Shakta perspective. So, knowing all these caveats added, um, I would add that what I am going to present is my humble attempt, and it should not be taken as a overall or exhaustive perspective on the Divine Mother because simply that is impossible. So let me just straight away begin. So currently we are in the sixth night of Navaratri's festival of 9 nights. And I think among it is among the most important of the festivals in India, especially in some parts of India, like Eastern India, it is the most important festival. And this is festival is celebrated in diverse ways. In eastern part of India, we call it Durga Puja. In southern part of India, in Mysore and all, we call it Dasara. And of course, in the north, they celebrate it with Ram Leela, etc. But at its very core, Navaratri is a celebration of Shakti, celebration of the primordial Shakti, the Adya, the cosmic power, and its diverse manifestations. And it begins with Mahalaya Amavasya. And this Mahalaya Amavasya, in fact, what our understanding is that Mahalaya Amavasya marks the beginning of the Devi Paksha. We had before that the Pitru Paksha. Now the Devi Paksha starts a 15-day period wherein the Devi herself descends on the earthly realm, and it is this descent which is celebrated. It is the availability of Divine Mother in a special sense for the purpose of worship. See, we can worship the Devi all the time, yes, but during Navaratris, it is a special time. The Devi Paksha is a special time. We can offer her a special mode of worship because she is available in a special way. She is available in a more strong way. The Shakti, her presence is more visible. But who is this Devi that we worship? And there are so many names that we worship in, and so many forms that we worship in. There are so many different upasana kramas itself. So, who is this deity whom we worship? There are many names, but one which we will discuss today, and which is perhaps which is a name which, in essence, constitutes is all other forms within it, which holds all other forms within it is Chandika. We can see that there are three major kinds of different ways of worshipping Chandika. I mean, these are three different upasana kramas, and the most famous one is, of course, the Navadurga. We worship one deity on different night. Every night we different. That is Shailaputri. We have this mantra: Pratamam Shailaputri cha Dvitiyam Brahmacharini तृतीयं चन्द्रघण्टेति कूष्माण्डेति चतुर्थकं पञ्चमं स्कन्दमातेति षष्ठं कात्यायनीति इति च सप्तमं कालरात्रीति अष्टमं सिद्धिदात्री. This is usually chanted this mantra, and these 9 forms are worshipped on different days. So on the 6th day we will be worshipping Katyayani, as Srinath ji said, a very fierce form of a deity, warrior form of a deity, somebody who is ready to kill the asuras. But this description of a fierce form applies not just to Katyayani, it applies to Chandika herself, her in her very nature. And this 9 deities are, in fact, if you I don't know how many have noticed. I was very surprised when I had this realization. Shailaputri, as the daughter of a mountain, represents the mother in a very child, this very small child form. Brahmacharini is represents the stage of brahmacharya, that is after she has puberty but before marriage. Chandraghanta represents a stage of marriage, Kushmanda stage of pregnancy, and the Skandamata stage of motherhood. I mean, so these different mothers are closely connected to women's, the biological cycle, the way different stages, different ashramas that a woman undergoes. And then there is Upasana Krama of Dasha Mahavidya. This is more prevalent, more practiced by the Shaktopasakas. A different day, different Mahavidya is worshipped, and Mahavidyas are great goddesses. They are very great. I mean, you cannot worship them on it your own. They needs a lot of diksha and a lot of it's a Guru Shishya Parampara. We have to go into that. So in the Dasha Mahavidyas are Kali, Tara, Shodashi, Bhuvaneshwari, Chinnamasta, Bhairavi, Dhumavati, Bagalmukhi, Matangi, and Kamala. So on different night, different mother is worshipped. But there is one more third Upasana Krama, and my presentation today will be focusing on this third Upasana Krama, wherein the first 3 nights Mahakali is worshipped, the second 3 nights Mahalakshmi is worshipped, and the third 3 days, the last 3 days of the Navaratri, Mahasaraswati is worshipped. So, what is the basis of this third Upasana Krama, wherein Chandika is understood to have manifested in 3 different forms of Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. Please note that the Mahakali is different from Kali, and Mahalakshmi is different from Lakshmi, and Mahasaraswati is different from Saraswati. So these three, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati, are special kind of manifestations of the divine, and it is this Upasana Krama we will be more discussing in today's session. So where do we get this knowledge, or where does the story of the account of Chandika in these 3 forms of Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati comes? It comes from the text called Devi Mahatmya. I'm sure most of the viewers are familiar with this text. It is also called as Durga Saptashati or Chandipatha, sorry. Chandipatha, because it's a pata, the parayana of a text on Chandika. Durga Saptashati, Chandika also called as Durga Saptashati, is a text containing 700 verse. It is actually does not contain 700 verse in a conventional sense, because in this text, wherein says Devi Uvacha, Rishi Uvacha, even that is considered as a verse number. So by such counting, it becomes Saptashati, 700 verse. And Devi Mahatma is, of course, glory of the goddess. This is the same text, and this Saptashati appears in Markandeya Purana, one of the very important Puranas, wherein Rishi Markandeya narrates 3 different accounts of Devi Chandika's fierce battles against different asuras and rakshasas. So the crux of the story of Devi Mahatmya, wherein we get to understand Chandika, who we get to understand an answer to the question is who is Chandika. In this, she is described, she is presented to us by our rishis, the Rishi Markandeya specifically, through 3 exploits of the Devi, 3 fierce battles against different kinds of asuras and rakshasas. So just imagine, you would hardly find these things in any other philosophical or religious systems. Of course, ancient polytheistic traditions had similar things, but in current situation, the Gita was delivered on the battlefield. Likewise, the Devi Mahatmya, which gives us the glory of the goddess, is all about war. It is a battle of the divine with the demonic forces, with the asuric forces, the battle of dharma with adharmic forces. Similarly, we have Lalita Sahasranama, which is also set in the battlefield of Lalita the Mahatripura Sundari fighting against Bandasura. So just imagine, for all those who think that our Hindu Dharma is all about pacifism or a very distorted, perverted understanding of ahimsa, our texts tell something different. Our texts tell us that there is a eternal battle going on between Devatas and the Asuras. This is a theme on all the Puranas. It is a theme of the Mahabharata, the theme of the Ramayana. It is a theme of Hindu civilization, that we as a civilization are aware that there is a fierce battle that is continuously going on between dharma and adharma, and the texts are questioning us, asking us, for posing a challenge to us, whether we are on the side of the dharma or whether we choose to be side on the adharma. So, with this context, so we have to understand Chandika and her manifestations. These legends portray Devi Chandika in her fiercest aspects, who destroys asuras, rakshasas, and everything bad, evil, and negative in the universe, and protects the righteous, protects the innocent, protects the devotees, and helps the devotees to attain highest goal, cross the ocean of samsara. So it is as much a story about the, at one level, the Devi Mahatma is a story about a cosmic battle between the Mahadevi and the Asuras. But at another level, it is also a story about human struggle, human fight against its own, our own internal Asuras, and in our struggle to reach the ultimate goal. What is ultimate goal? Moksha. So there are two aspects to this story, and we will use this play of words, use the play of narratives, how the Rishi Markandeya has embedded in his narrative a account of the cosmic battle, making us aware of the cosmic happenings, so that kind of giving a very bird's eye view of how things actually happen in this universe, but at the same time has embedded the jewels of Vedanta, the embedded the deep knowledge of Vedanta within the story framework, such that the story can be understood as an internal battle that is happening inside each of us. But let me give a caveat here, and I think this is a very important caveat, because I have often read, a few years back, I read somewhere wherein they say, see this, all these Devi Devata, they're all metaphors for deeper Vedantic knowledge. They're just metaphors, allegories. We should not take this seriously. I think I would say this is kind of a pseudo Vedantic understanding, and this is why we get into a lot of problems. I mean, I heard yesterday I read some judgment of one of the honorable courts, which says that according to Vedantic perspective, all these temples, they do not exist. We did not have temple for Agnideva, so all these temples do not matter. Everything is inside us. So I call it, this is a complete misuse of Vedanta, and I am not attempted to do it. So let me add this caveat here, that a investigation into Vedantic perspective of Devi Mahatmya, of the story of Devi, or story of Chandika, or understanding Chandika from a Vedantic perspective, does not mean that Chandika is a allegorical phenomena. No, our Devis, our Devatas, they are real entities, they are real beings, they are real manifestations, they are the very personification of the universal cosmic Shaktis. And with this understanding, we need to approach the issue. When we speak about Vedantic perspective, I'm speaking about internal transformations, and such transformations will not happen if the Chandika, or as a Devi, does not actually exist. If it is just a metaphor, such internal transformation is almost impossible. It is because the Devi exists. She exists in the essence, in the form, and the energy pervades everything. That is why we are able to even try to understand her in as the internal transformational process and not otherwise, right? So with this important caveat, because there is a famous tantric saying which says, yatha pinde tatha brahmande, or yatha brahmande tatha pinde. However you take it, what is in my macrocosm is also in microcosm, and what is in microcosm is also in macrocosm. So just moving forward with this caveat, the story of Devi Mahatmya is divided into three portions: Prathama Charitra, Madhyama Charitra, and Uttar Charitra. Prathama Charitra is associated with Devi Mahakali. It is Chandika who manifests in the form of Mahakali. And the story is when Vishnu is asleep, Narayana is asleep, from his sleep, Madhu and Kaitaba, two asuras come and they try to destroy the Brahma. And then Brahma does a stuti, and this Yoga Nidra comes out in the form of Mahakali and facilitates the slaying of Madhu and Kaitaba. So first, Prathama Charitra is about how Mahakali, Chandika in the aspect of Mahakali, facilitate the destruction of Madhu and Kaitaba, which were two very fierce asuras. The Madhyama Charitra is the story about how goddess Chandika manifests as Mahalakshmi and destroys the mighty Asura Mahishasura and his very, very large army. The Uttara Charitra, the Uttama Charitra, the last portions of the Devi Mahatmya is about just about how it's a story of how goddess Chandika manifests as Mahasaraswati, and as Mahasaraswati, she manifests even different forms. She manifests as Kali, as Chamunda, and many different forms, and destroys various number of mighty Rakshasas and Asuras like Dhumralochana, Chanda, Munda, Raktabija, Nishumbha, and Shumba. So, uh, with this brief background into the story, we need to now, I will proceed further to understand the Vedantic perspective. So, as I was saying, this Asuras and Rakshasas represent both the cosmic forces that really exist in the cosmos. They are the forces and personalities who really exist in the cosmos, but also at the individual level, they also represent the inner phenomenon, inner enemies, inner Asuri Prakriti, as they say, inner Asuric manifestations within an individual. Similarly, the Devi is a real phenomenon at the cosmic level, but she also exists as the Devata Prakriti inside each of us. As Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, I stay in the hearts, in the Hridaya of all beings. So Devi exists inside each of us, in the Hridaya of us. And Hridaya is a Vedantic concept, as most of you will be knowing. It is not a physical heart, it is not a, it's a seat of consciousness. So, in the individual context, Chandika, the story of Chandika is a Jivatma's fight against the internal enemies, the Arishavarga, in the quest of moksha, and that the nuggets of Vedantic wisdom are hidden in this legend. So, I will quickly run you through the general Vedantic scheme for those who may not be initiated in Vedanta, but though I think most of the audience here already know the basics of Advaita Vedanta, but still, Vedanta posits moksha or the liberation as the ultimate goal of life. Liberation is understood as the freedom from all kinds of bondage imposed by the empirical world, the body and the mind in general. And Advaita, of course, Vedanta has a specific definition of moksha. We'll come to that. The Upanishads assert that the root cause of all sorrow is the false identification of the self with the body and mind, which causes the attachment to the empirical universe. So Vedanta posits moksha as the ultimate goal of universe, and moksha is freedom from the different kinds of bondage to the empirical world. And this bondage is caused due to false identification of the self, the Atman, with the body mind complex because of the avidya or the ajnana about our true nature of reality about ourselves. What is the true nature of reality? The true nature of reality, Advaita says, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Ayam Atma Brahma, Ekam Eva Advitiyam Brahma. That is, our Atma is non-different from Brahman. It is very Brahman itself, which is unborn, ever free, blissful, is of the nature of Sat, Chit, and Anantam. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. So, moksha can be achieved I know in a technically Vedantic sense that moksha is not something to be achieved, it is our real nature, but still from a very Vyavaharika perspective, from a common person's common everyday perspective, moksha is a goal, is the ultimate goal of life, and it can be achieved by discarding the false identifications of the Atman with the body mind complex and the direct realization of the unity of Atman with Brahman. Atma Brahma Aikyam or Atma Jnanam, Atma Sakshatkaram, however we describe it. This constitutes moksha or the liberation from the cycle of birth to death. So, what does it mean practically? Because the Shakta texts are basically practical texts. They are texts which are less philosophy and more of practice. So, to understand, to map Vedanta to the Devi Mahatmya, we have to have a basic understanding of how Vedanta works in practice. So we discussed the goal moksha, and we are currently in a vyavaharika position. Most of us are in a grihastha state. Most of us are full of desires. Most of us may have some kind of spiritual desire, but mostly we have attachment to artha and kama and to some extent dharma, but not much to moksha. It is just something we know, we have heard. So Vedanta says there is a three-tier process, three stages to reach the ultimate goal from where we are currently. Let me explain this three-tier process in a reverse manner, so to speak. Um, Vedanta, the ultimate moksha is not possible without Atmagyana, but Atmagyana itself is not possible without Vichara or self-inquiry. And what is this Vichara? It is, as I discussed, a analysis of the self, analysis of Atma, Anatma Vichara. It is called analysis of how Atma is different from Anatma entities of mind and body. So this whole process is called Vichara. And but to practice vichara, we have to first gain competencies that will help us to practice vichara. And these competencies are called as sadhana chatushtaya. There are fourfold qualifications required to practice this vichara as a sadhana. Vichara is the Vedanta sadhana. And so, what are these fourfold competencies? The fourfold competencies include Viveka, Vairagya, Shatka Sampatti, Mumukshutva. Viveka means Nitya, Anitya, Viveka, discrimination between what is permanent, what is impermanent, what is real and what is unreal. Brahmo Satyam Jagad Mityam. So this is the Viveka aspect. Vairagya is dispassion, detachment towards all the worldly pleasures. Mumukshatva means burning desire for liberation, not just uh, we will get liberation in some life. No, with the burning desire. I want to achieve liberation in this life, and I will be ready to do everything that is needed. That is Mumukshatva. And then Shatka Sampatti is a group of six qualities: Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhana, which all relate to the control of the mind and the senses. Titaksha is forbearance, Shama, Dama is Indriya Nigra, internal, external, Uparati is withdrawal from the external senses, Samadhana is, establishment in our own self, Shraddha is Shraddha of trust in our Guru and Shastras, etc. So this sadhana chatushtaya, but this sadhana chatushtaya, thus we said moksha is not possible without atmagyana, and atmagyana is not possible without vichara, and vichara is not possible without sadhana chatushtaya. But sadhana chatushtaya itself is not possible. We cannot develop these fourfold qualities as long as a person has a sufficient degree of purity of mind, that is chitta shuddhi, and one pointed concentration, ekagra chitta. And this in turn, chitta shuddhi can be in turn developed through the practice of dharma anushtana, karma anushtana, the practice of karma yoga and the karma anushtana, that we can say swadharma anushtana, wherein we do our samanya dharma, we do our vishesha dharma. Through that, we will slowly achieve chitta shuddhi. And then through the practice of bhakti and upasana. See, upasana is a very wide term. It has aspects of dhyana, it has aspects of bhakti, and everything is inside it, dhyana, bhakti, everything. So this upasana leads to ekagra chitta. So dharma anushtana, and dharma anushtana importantly includes both the performance of ritual worship as well as performance of righteous duties, both samanya and vishesha dharma. So what are the three tier process then? The first stage is performance of dharma anushtana and upasana, which results in sadhana chatushtaya, which imparts upon a seeker sadhana chatushtaya, the fourfold qualities. This is the first stage. And then with the development of, I just have to qualify it. The first stage is dharma anushtana. The second stage is upasana. And sometimes they go hand in hand, but they may go one after the other as well. That is how even ashrama system is divided. Grihastha ashrama, you do dharma anushtana, and in vanaprastha, you do upasana krama. So dharma anushtana first tier, upasana is second tier, and when you do both and you develop this sadhana chatushtaya, and finally comes the Vedanta vichara, the Atmanatma vichara, which constitute the third stage or third tier, which finally leads to Atma Jnana and Moksha. So with this very quick view of practical Vedantic stages, and I will go through the next and important, the crux of the aspect of today's presentation, mapping this legend or the story or the account of Chandika that we have in Durga Saptashati, with using the framework of Vedanta that I just discussed. So let us start with the Pratama Charitra. Pratama Charitra, as I said, deals with the killing of the Rakshasas Madhu and Kaitaba by Mahakali. So what the approach I have adopted in this presentation, in this analysis of Vedanta, is trying to understand the etymological meaning of the different asuras that the Mahadevi slays, and trying to map those meanings to various Vedantic concepts. So Madhu Kaitaba, the term Madhu and Kaitaba is very interesting, and though I am not myself a Sanskrit scholar per se, I have a basic understanding of Sanskrit. For this research, I consulted number of Sanskrit scholars whom I know, so that I get the etymologies, the meaning right. So if there are any mistake, I ask forgiveness of the learned people in the audience. So in Sanskrit, the Madhu means honey, and Kaitaba can be derived from Kita and Bha. Kita means insects and Bha means resemblance. So Madhu Kaitaba refers to having a resemblance to honeybees, having a resemblance to the kind of the way a honeybee lives. So what is the first thing that comes to our mind when you think about honeybee? Of course, honey. We all like Dabur honey. So, but apart from the honey, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the bees itself? That they are very hard working. They're continuously putting effort to collect the honey, to make the honey, and they're very hard workers. Just like ants, they're very very hard workers. And what does this represent? So when I was first researching on this topic, and when I first read this, the etymological meaning, and it struck me. Look, it is as if it is a allegorical, it's a representation of how all of us live our day-to-day life. See, we are all very much busy in the pursuit of our artha and kama, the pursuit of our material prosperity and material happiness. We get up in the morning, get ready to go to office, work throughout the day, come back, has spend some little time with family. We all have so many responsibilities. The entire Grihastha Dharma is a very difficult ashrama in a sense, and because we are always involved in the society, we are always involved in upholding others, taking care of others. So many things are happening. Most of us do not have time nor desire for moksha. We speak about adhyatma moksha. Okay, Okay, someday. We'll always keep postponing it if we have desire. But in most of our cases, we don't even have a desire. It's all nonsense. I'm trying to get my life go through another day. I'm just trying to earn my money so that I can live for another day. I can earn food for another day. I mean, we have all spectrum of people, some from the very poor section to the very rich section, but all of them, we are all are too much indulged, indulging ourselves in this in this artha and kama pursuit. So this is kind of a tamasic indulgence. This reflects the kind of dedication that the honeybees have to collect the honey. So we are like the honeybees. We are living in our day to day, so much disturbance, so much noise, that we forget that there is a higher goal to life, there is a higher meaning to life, there is much more to life than getting a car, having a family, going to work, earning too much money. So this is kind of a tamasic indulgence. And so the Rakshasas, Madhu and Kaitaba, represent in a Vedantic sense, they represent this inner tamasic indulgence. The Madhu Kaitaba, if I am speaking internally, our inner Madhu Kaitaba are these tamasic indulgences, the tamasic inertia. What about Mahakali? See, it's very interesting. Devi manifests in a particular form to destroy a particular kind of asura, and there is the clue again. Mahakali is a personification, is a representation. There are three major Shaktis in the world. See, the primordial Shakti, Adya, is Chandika, and this Shakti can be understood through different frameworks. And one of the frameworks is to understand Shakti in the threefold format of Jnana Shakti, Icha Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. And Mahakali represents this Kriya Shakti aspect. She is the personification of Kriya Shakti. And her slaying of Madhukaitaba gives us a clue about how should we overcome, transcend the tamasic indulgences that we have inside her. Mahakali, Kriya Shakti. What is the basis of what does Kriya Shakti do? We use this Kriya Shakti to perform Dharma Anushtana, to perform Karma Yoga, to develop Nishkama Karma, to practice Nishkama Karma. Without Kriya Shakti, without tapping into Kriya Shakti, we cannot perform these actions. And performing these actions in turn strengthens our Kriya Shakti, which is already inherent in us. Devi already lives in us. We have to use the Shakti of the Devi. Both Devi and the Asuras live inside us as different aspects of our own psychology, different aspects of our own mind, different tendencies, our samskaras, our asanas, etc. And we use this Kriya Shakti of Mahakali inside us to Dharma Anushtana, to perform Dharma Anushtana, to do Karma Yoga, to do Nishkama Karma, so that we develop Chitta Shuddhi and Mumukshutvam. Only when Chitta Shuddhi is there, we have a certain amount of purification of the mind by fighting the Arshad Vargas, Kama, Krodha, Mada, Lobha, and all those things. Then we realize that there is much more to life than just material pursuit. That is when the Mumukshutvam, the first seed of Mumukshutvam comes. This impulse of Mumukshutvam helps one to overcome tamasic inertia and turn the mind towards moksha. So one who worships the Divine Mother Chandika in the Upasana Krama of Mahakali, the worship, the ritual worship, uh, imparts these kinds of internal transformations to the devotee, to the worshipper, to the performer of the ritual. So this is, as I said, this is not all merely allegorical things. These are descriptions of real internal phenomenon as well as cosmic external phenomenon. Yatha pinde tatha brahmande. So the impulse of mumukshutvam brought by dharma anushtana using the kriya shakti constitutes the antidote for tamasic indulgence in the material pursuit This is represented by Mahakali slaying of Madhukaitaba. So the Pratama Charitra constitutes the first tier of Vedantic path towards moksha. So now, with this introduction to first Charitra, I think second Charitra becomes more easier to understand where I am going. The Madhyama Charitra, which contains the story of Mahishasura slaying goddess Mahalakshmi, basically represents the second tier of Vedantic path, the tier of Upasana Marga. Who is Mahishasura? Mahisha Asura. Who is Mahisha? What does Mahisha mean? Mahisha in Sanskrit means buffalo. What is the one thing that comes to our mind when we see a buffalo? Tamas, Rajas. Tamas of dullness, but Rajas of ego. Pride, ego, dullness. These are the things that Mahishasura represents. Mahishasura has a huge ego. He represented this all the pride, the dullness, and ego that is inside each of us. He is a cosmic asura. He was indeed slayed by the Mahadevi in one of the Samvatsaras, but he also lives inside us through the principles, through phenomenon of dullness, pride, ego, and other tamasic and rajasic forces. That is Mahishasura and his army. So what is the antidote of it? What does Mahalakshmi represent? I said there are three cosmic forces: Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. Mahakali represents Kriya Shakti, and Mahalakshmi represents Icha Shakti. She is the personification of Icha Shakti. See, I'm using metaphor, allegory, personification, so many terms, but again and again I stress this. These are all English terms, and we have to use it. But even though I'm using sometimes metaphor, allegorical, it is not. It does not mean that the Devi does not exist. She is very much real. She is there. She herself manifests in us as Icha Shakti. So Mahalakshmi, who is personification of Icha Shakti, or the force of will, the willpower. In today's language, you say the power of the mind. You have so many wellness books today, which says the power of the mind, willpower, and all those things. So this Mahalakshmi, which is the personification of Icha Shakti, she is the means to slay this asura of dullness and ego and pride. So in practical terms, this actually what does Icha Shakti, this power of the mind, how do we use it? How do we utilize it? How do we strengthen it? How do we implement it? It is through Upasana. Upasana is concentration and meditation. Upasana is yoga, dhyana, bhakti. All these are upasana. And all these processes, take for Patanjala Yoga. What does Patanjala Yoga do? The first two stages, you leave it out. Afterwards, the asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, samadhi. Basically, it is training the mind. It is training the prana. It is then training the mind. It is a means to control our mind. The mind, which is otherwise roaming around like a monkey, it is controlling that mind. The dhyana controls the mind. Similarly, in bhakti, the bhakti yoga, we superimpose everything, we give everything to our ishta, and we focus purely on the ishta. Such focusing results in one pointed concentration. That is ekagrachit. You either whether you go through the yogic dhyana process or to the bhakti process. The very definition of bhakti in some of the texts by Madhusudana Saraswati, etc., even by Shankaracharya and Shivananda Lahiri, is the continuous flow of the mind towards our Ishta Devata, our Devata, the Brahman. The flow of the mind, continuous flow like oil that flows, continuously without a break. So that is ekagra chitta. So bhakti by definition is ekagra chitta. It is ekagrata, continuous concentration on one particular thing. And that involves utilization of Icha Shakti. And by practice of dhyana and bhakti, the Upasana, we strengthen the Icha Shakti in us more and more and more, such that ultimately we attain Ekagra Chitta. But there is second aspect to it, because in Upasana it involves the kind of bhakti wherein we surrender our ego at the feet of the Ishvara. It helps us to overcome our inner Mahisha who stands for pride. So we all have a huge pride in us, and a little slight to our, if we sense a little disrespect, we get very much hurt to our pride. So, but when we think about Ishvara, when we develop a relationship with Ishvara, we surrender our ego. So this is how we overcome our ego. So through Upasana, we overcome our ego, we overcome the weaknesses of the mind. So Upasana leads to control of the mind and the senses and the development of the qualities of Shatka Sampatti like Shama, Dama, Uparati, Shraddha and Samadhana. So the Madhyama Charitra constitutes the second tier of Vedantic path, and it represents how Mahalakshmi, who stands for Icha Shakti, she, by her worship, by her continuous worship in this Upasana Krama, we are strengthening our Icha Shakti and fighting our own inner Mahishasura, slaying the Mahisha, slaying the dullness, the pride, the ego, everything. So coming to the final Charitra, this corresponds to the third tier of Vedantic path, the Vichara, and also to some important tenets of Sadhana Chatushtaya, that is that is especially this Viveka and Vairagya aspect. So in Uttara Charitra, it is not the one Rakshasa who is mainly slayed. There are a number of Rakshas slayed in other aspects also, but here mainly the Devis as Mahasaraswati, she slays uh, these Rakshasas in a particular order. First, the Dhumralochana is slayed, then Chanda and Munda, then Raktabija, and finally Nishumba and Shumba. And this order is also very significant from a Vedantic perspective. Who is Dhumralochana? Dhumralochana means one with smoky eyes. What does smoky eyes represent? It kind of gives a feeling of one with a mistaken perception, a confused perception. Vedantically speaking, it refers to the avidya, which causes, it refers to the mistaken perception that the world is permanent and Ishvara is non-existent. So this perception is caused due to avidya, our own real nature. So this confused perception due to avidya is represented by Dhumralochana. So what is the correct perception? Correct perception is Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam. Correct perception is Nitya Anista Vivekam knowledge. And how do we get this Vivekam knowledge? It is got through employment of Jnana Shakti. By approaching the Guru, studying and contemplating of the Shastra, that is Shravana, Manana, etc. So Mahasaraswati stands for Jnana Shakti, and through the employment of Jnana Shakti, which is represented by Mahasaraswati, we slay the inner Dhumralochana, which is incorrect, mistaken perception, wherein we perceive the snake as the reality. So this perception is removed by showing that the snake is mithya and the rope is satya. That nitya nitya vivekam is the jnana shakti here. After this vivekam is developed and this mistaken perception of Dhumralochana is removed, then comes the asuras of Chanda and Munda. Chanda Munda represent krodha or extreme feelings of anger and revenge. Munda literally means cutting the opponent's heads off. Now cut the head off, not beheading. So this is extreme krodha, extreme anger and revenge. And what is the Vedantic antidote to krodha? It is titaksha. Titaksha means patience and forbearance. I think Adi Shankaracharya defines as sahanam sarva dukkanam apratarikara purvakam chinta vilapa rahitam titaksha miti abhiriyate. I might have missed one or two words in between. So titaksha is forbearance. Through this forbearance, we overcome anger. And this is one of the very important Arishadvarga, very important inner asura that we have. The story of Vishwamitra and Vasishta is a good example, wherein Vishwamitra, even after millions of years of tapasya, he had so much krodha, and he kept losing his krodha whenever Indra tried to disrupt his tapasya. It took him long time to overcome krodha. So this after Dhumralochana, Chanda and Munda is killed by Mahasaraswati, and this killing of Chanda and Munda represents the transcending of inner Krodha through the development of Titaksha. And next is Rakta Bija. Rakta Bija means Rakta means blood, Bija means seeds. But Rakta also means desire. So Asura, Raktabija Asura is a personification of seeds of desire. Is the seeds of desire, and slaying of Raktabija is slaying of removing of this desire from root and stem. Complete removing of desire, which is nothing but Vairagya. See, the Raktabija Sura, like the desire, is very difficult to kill. You kill, you strike him once, and many other Raktabija stands in front of you. Likewise, you fulfill the desire or you suppress one desire, then 100 other desires come out. The only solution to desire or karma, in the sense of Arishat Varga, is dispassion or vairagyam, complete uprooting of the desire, root and stem, which again arises only through Jnana Shakti, through Vivekam. From Vivekam, we develop Vairagyam. This is all involves the use of Jnana Shakti. And finally, after the destruction of Madhukaitaba, our inner Madhukaitaba, and the destruction of Mahishasura and all this Dhumralochana, Chandamunda, and Raktabija, etc., we come to a stage when we have attained complete sadhana chatushtaya competencies, and now only the final tier is remaining, which is attaining of Atma Jnana by removing the complete false identification totally. And this final tier is represented by the story of Chandikas playing Nishumba and Shumba. Shumba and Nishumba represent Ahamkara and Mamakara respectively. Shumba, Ahankara, the I-ness, I, the ego. And Nishumba is Mamakara, this is mine, that is mine, mineness. Literally, though, Ahankara, the Shumba and Nishumba, the term literally means killing. And the Ni Shumba, Ni part, actually kind of qualifies, reinforces the quality of killing. But here the killing is used in a very specific way. And when I read this, I immediately connected to the Isha Upanishad's third verse, which says, Asurya namate loka andena tamasavrataha tanaste pretya vigacchante tehano atmahano janaha atmahana. The slayers of the self attain asura lokas. That is the what Isha Upanishad says. The slayers of the self means what? It means one who kind of metaphorically slay the Atman, in the sense that through avidya, through ignorance and rejection, through rejection that there is Atman, through rejection there is Brahman, and through materialism, to materialistic perspective that this world, idam alone exists, through he reinforces ahankara and mamakara. Through this strength of ahankara and mamakara, he rejects, so that metaphorically kills, he reals Atman, his real nature of Atman as Satchidananda Swarupa Atman. So this Shumba and Ashumba likewise represents this inner killing of the metaphorical killing of our own Atman by through our ignorance, through our attachment to body-mind complex, through the notions of ahankara and mamakara, I, mine. So the only way to overcome these asuras of I-ness and mindness is through the process of vichara or self-inquiry, which again involves utilization of jnana shakti inside us. What is this vichara? It is vichara involves first a separation of the self from the non-self, that is atma anatma vivekam. You separate the atma from the anatma, and then it causes the self to subsume the non-self entities. First, you understand the self as different from non-self, but later you overcome this duality through the Akhandakara Vritti Jnanam, which is called as Atma Jnanam. This Akhandakara Vritti Jnanam destroys, completely destroys all the Vidya Vrittis, all the Jnanam, allowing for our Atman to shine Atman to shine on its own. I mean, its real shining, its real state comes forward when all the obstructions are removed. And this establishment of ourselves in our own real nature is called as moksha. So the subsuming of the non-self entities into the self due to the destruction of ignorance is Atma Jnana, and thus the Uttar Charita represents the final tier of Vedanta path, which wherein using Vichara, which implies Jnana Shakti, one destroys the asuras of I-ness and mindness and attains self-realization and liberation. We are coming to the conclusion of this presentation. So I asked myself, okay, I have tried to interpret Devi Mahatmya in a Vedantic perspective, and I can make out that various asuras are connected to various internal enemies, the Arishad Vargas, and the Devi's form is related to the Kriya Shakti, Icha Shakti, and Jnana Shakti, which is needed to overcome these internal enemies and attain Atma Jnana. But is this interpretation authentic? Do we have any evidence in the Shastras wherein this interpretation and wherein clues lies to that this interpretation is correct? So I then read Devi Atharva Shirsham. This is one of the texts. With this Atharva Shirsham, Devi Atharva Shirsham is, I think, found in it's Rig Veda itself, from Rig Veda and Atharva Veda. And it is usually among the chapters, among the texts which are chanted, at least in some sampradayas, before chanting Saptashati. The Saptashati Parayana has a specific format wherein in the beginning you chant the Kavacha and Argala and all those stotras and Ratri Suktam, etc. And in that towards the end also you chant a certain series of stotrams and etc. So in some tradition, Devi Atharva Shirsham is also chanted in the beginning. And this Devi Atharva Shirsham basically it's a Devi's self-description of who she is. Here the Devas approach the great goddess Mahadevi and ask her, oh great goddess, who really are you? Who are you? So she gives a series of explanations of who she really is. And I think there can be no better pramana to who know who Chandika is, who the Divine Mother is, than her own description. And she says, I am the very essence, very form of Brahman, Brahma Swarupini. And from me, this Jagat, universe, in the form of Prasha, Purusha, and Prakriti has generated, which is both Shunya and Ashunya, which is both Anandam and Ananandam, which is both knowledge and non-knowledge, which is existence and non-existence, which is Pancha Mahabhuta as well as other than Pancha Mahabhuta. I am the whole perceived universe. And she said, I am Veda as well as Aveda, I'm learning as well as ignorance, I'm unborn, Aja as well as born, and I am up, down, and in the middle. So I think, and she further describes herself how she is the essence and substratum of all the devatas, the Rudra, Indra, Vasu, Aditya, Vishnu, etc., and how she sustains and cherishes each of them. And she points out that she's the first among those worthy of worship because she is being the very essence of all deities. It is she who receives the worship and grants the fruits to the worshipper. In short, when Devi proclaims that I am the Brahma Swarupini, I am the very Brahman, very essence of Brahman, what is she saying? She's saying that the Shakti, Chandika, is none other than Upanishadic Brahman. If Chandika is Upanishadic Brahman, then attainment of moksha is attainment of Chandika. Attainment of Chandika is attainment of moksha, and this attainment of Chandika happens. The Devi Mahatmya is a text, is a practical text, how you can utilize the Jnana, Icha, and Kriya Shakti you can invoke the Devi Shakti inside you to slay the inner asuras and the Rakshasas such that you attain Chandika herself. You attain the ultimate moksha. You attain the you realize your identification with Chandika, with Upanishad Brahman as Chandika. So to conclude, I hope you all enjoyed this short presentation. I'm, I think, almost out of time now. I just want to conclude that um, Navaratri in many sense is a practical expression of Vedanta path, and I am stressing this practical aspect. And Legend of Chandika provides deep insights into theoretical as well as practical aspects of Vedantic path to moksha. And Subhash Kak, one of well-known Hindu scholar, he writes this of Vedanta Devi Mahatmya. He says it presents an account of what Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati do to bring about transformation of Prakriti from Tamas to Rajas and from Rajas to Sattva and from Sattva to Supreme Vijaya, which is mastery in the absolute. And this is what I have tried to present in my presentation through enunciation of what different asuras stand for and what different the different aspects of Devi stands for. So goddess Chandika in short is none other than Upanishad Brahman, and through her triple forms representing Kriya Shakti, Icha Shakti, and Jnana Shakti, she facilitates the performance of dharma, upasana, and vichara, leading one to ultimate goal of moksha. And again, I end with this caveat that it goes without saying that asuras and different forms of Supreme Devi that are enunciated in Saptashati are not mere metaphors or internal processes. They represent real cosmic beings. Goddess Chandika and her diverse forms are not allegorical, they are real manifestations of Supreme Shakti. And the worship of Divine Mother through systematic ritual procedures or upasana kramas will lead a seeker to inner transformation and take him towards moksha. With this, I come to a conclusion of my presentation, and I am very thankful for Chinmay Vishwavidyapeeth, especially Srinath ji and Professor Gauri ji for inviting me to do this presentation. I hope I have been able to do justice to my topic, and with this, I end my presentation. Shri Gurubhyo Namah. It can be everything. It can be yajna, it can be homa, it can be puja, it can be bali. Everything comes under this when I'm using it, because I also use the term upasana krama. So in the Shakta tradition, there are specific upasana kramas, and in some upasana kramas, there are bali also involved, including pashu bali, and that they are all equally authentic paths, and different upasana kramas are suggested for people with different tendencies, different competencies, different temperaments, and all of them are equally valid. Yes, in a sense, you can say so, because Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara stands for Brahma stands for Rajas, and Vishnu stands for Sattva, and Maheshwara stands for Tamas. So similarly you see here as Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Icha Shakti, and different kinds of correspondences can be drawn. Even we have a correspondence of Dasha Mahavidya with the Dashavataras of Vishnu. In some tantric texts, we have this correspondence as well. So lot of different kinds of correspondence are possible, but I think it is best to approach each one on its own standing. That will be more easier rather than trying to correlate. I mean, correlations are possible, it is valid. I'm just saying it is more in the Shakta perspective. It is from Shakti everything else manifests. So it is from Shakti, all the devas are manifest from the Shakti. She is a supreme Adya. See, Shakti is Brahman. Shakti is Brahman. See, it all depends upon how you are approaching the thing. See, Ramakrishna used to say Brahman is Shakti and Shakti is Brahman, and they are not different. And that is fact. See, here Shakti herself says, Aham Brahma Swarupini. So when she's saying Aham Brahma Swarupini, she is not saying there are two entities. She is not saying I am different from Brahman. So See, there are different perspectives. You can, from a Vyavaharika perspective, you can perceive that we can differentiate between Purusha and Prakriti, or Brahman and Maya, right? But even that, see, we in Advaita, we speak about Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. But Nirguna and Saguna Brahman are not two Brahmans. There are no two Brahmans. The same Brahman who is understood as Nirguna is also Saguna. And to become Saguna, then he uses his own Shakti. You call it Maya, you call it Leela, but he is using his own Shakti. Just like, I think the example is given is, you cannot separate the sun rays from the heat. Like the light and the heat, they come together, package, they're single package, right? So it is the mind which plays the tricks into trying to find out the duality, trying to separate things. So we need to, it's a mental tendency, I would say. The Shakti does not claim that she is different. She says she is Brahma Swarupini. Kriya Shakti, Kriya here has been used in a specific sense. Yes, we are all actions involve Kriya Shakti, but the point is in wherein we are using this Kriya Shakti. Are we using the Kriya Shakti to just pursue Artha and Kama specifically by ignoring the Dharma, ignoring Moksha, or are we pursuing the worldly things or actions for a higher goal? So when we are employing Kriya Shakti, so what the Shastra says? Shastra says, Swadharmo Nidhanam Shreya. You do so your Swadharma, and you do it in a sense of duty and responsibility. That is Karma Anushtana or Dharma Anushtana. So when you're doing Dharma Anushtana, that is you're avoiding performance of adharmic actions. That is, you are not earning money by robbing a bank, but you are earning money by working hard. So when you keep doing actions in this sense, in a righteous sense, in a dharmic sense, by doing your duties, etc., when you're employing Kriya Shakti here in this sense of Dharma Anushtana, you're slowly traveling, walking the path of Chitta Shuddhi. Yes, Chitta Shuddhi, wherein slowly you develop Nishkama Bhava. And then you start doing your duties in a Nishkama Dasha, which is Karma Yoga. So here, utilization of Kriya Shakti is in Dharma Anushtana and in the sense of Kriya Yoga, Karma Yoga. So all actions are true. All actions has this Kriya Shakti, but it is using in a specific sense. The story in the Mahatmya, it says Vishnu was sleeping. From that Yoga Nidra itself has come this Madhukaitava. So there is the Madhukaitaba arises in Vishnu when he is asleep. So there is a connection between Yoga Nidra and this. But Yoga Nidra herself, when she leaves Vishnu, she takes the form of Mahakali. So Yoga Nidra is Mahakali. Mahakali is Yoga Nidra. So you see that there is a connection between what Madhukaitaba represents in the terms of actions for Kama and Artha, and actions, same Kriya Shakti is also used for dharmic actions, for Karma Yoga. No, I mean, see,
Not really.
Markandeya, it cannot be possible because, see, Markandeya Purana is if you are speaking in a historical sense, the current Purana is historically after the Veda. But I think, see, let me make a point here. Let us not approach our Shastra in a historical sense beyond academic curiosity, because that distorts things. What is Markandeya Rishi reveals in this Purana, in this text? He speaks of happenings in a very different kalpas, in a very different samvatsaras, in a different yugas. No, now there is no way to either verify it or falsify it, that happenings. So let us not apply scientific methodologies to understand Shastra. Our Purana is a Shastra Pramana, it is Swata Pramana. There is no way to falsify it using other pramanas. We cannot falsify it using pratyaksha, etc. So it is Swata Pramana, it is true because it is said so. We have to take it as it is. It does not matter whether Veda mentions it or not. Veda mentions Devi many times. So I think that should be enough for us. The Devi Saptashati appears to give a particular process of tackling them. In the first Charitra, the Madhukkaitaba is tackled, the tamasic inertia, the tamasic indulgence is tackled. And then once you overcome your tamas through some kind of rajas, that is the Kriya Shakti, and then you tackle other kind of asuras, the other tendencies with Mahishasura represent dullness, pride, ego, and after you tackle it to some extent, then you can go further and tackle the others. Like you have it, as I mentioned in my talk, this the mention of Dhumra Lochana, etc. in the particular order, the order is also significant, as significant as the terms itself. The first, there's Vivekam in the form of slaying of Dhumra Lochana, and then there is Chanda Munda killing, Titaksham and all, and then this Rakta Bijasura is killed through Vairagyam. So this is the process that Saptashati gives us, and the following the Saptashati Upasana Krama, it helps us to attain the ultimate in through this process. So, but of course, if we are speaking from a purely Vedantic perspective, I mean, it depends on individual which we will be able to overcome first. I mean, you can take any of the Arishad Varga and take it by the horns, and when you try to suppress it, ultimately when you are successful in suppressing it, you will be successful in suppressing all of them. So because all of them are connected, you try to suppress Kama, you will end up ultimately suppressing, overcoming. Suppress is not the correct word here, because suppression will lead to problems. Overcoming, you try to overcome Kama, you finally, when you overcome Kama completely, you will see that you will have overcome other aspects of Arishad Varga as well. So so you have to just start somewhere in a very generic sense, but in the Saptashati Upasana Krama, this particular format is given.